Hi, this is part 2 of Piano Lessons for Beginners, lesson 2. In the first part, we quickly ran over everything found in lesson 1. So now we're going to move on to the second part. Now, in the first part, we looked at root position chords. So just to recap, a root position chord, you take the first note of the scale, the third note of the scale, and the fifth note of the scale. And, do you want to zoom in for this, Callum? Cool. And that's how we do a root position chord. Okay. Now, today in this part, we're going to learn how to do a first inversion chord, which is a fundamental thing that you've got to learn in order to play piano in the way that I'm going to teach. So to do a first inversion, basically what you do is, if we look here, we've got a C, an E, and a G. Now, to play a first inversion, you basically take the C at the bottom, and then you move it up to a C, an octave higher instead. So now you're playing these three notes, and the C is now at the top, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my fingers around. So now we're just doing that with one hand. That is now the same chord, but you can see now, instead of the C being down here, the C is at the top. And that is a first inversion chord, okay? So that's what you've got to learn to do first of all. So what I suggest you do is take the thumb inversion chord, which you hopefully learned to do in part 1, and then best bet is if you hold those second two notes down, then move your thumb to there, your index finger to there, and then use your little finger to play the C at the top. And that is basically a first inversion chord, okay? So now, the first thing I'm going to explain is that we're going to call this, instead of calling it a first inversion chord, I'm actually going to call it a little finger inversion chord. And the reason for this is that your little finger is now on the key note, which is note 1, the C, or note 1. We're going to use numbers more than letters, so try and learn these in numbers, okay? So this is note 8 or note 1. And this is going to be called little finger inversion because your little finger is on the key note, okay? So the first thing you're going to have to now do is learn to play all 6 chords that we learned in part 1, but using little finger inversion. So this is now called 1 because your little finger is on note 1. Then if you move everything up, you get chord 2 because your little finger is now chord 2. But the key thing is that you keep all the distances the same. Now the important thing to remember is below the root note, where the little finger is falling, there's always a gap of 2 for this inversion. And then the other 2 are nicely formed like that. So that's chord 2. Move everything up again, you get chord 3. Move everything up again, you get chord 4, chord 5, and chord 6. So this is little finger inversion. And what I suggest you do is learn to run up all of those chords in order, first of all. So you got chord 1, don't forget your gap of 2 under there, and make sure you use the correct fingers. So it's little finger, index finger, and thumb. So that's chord 1, then play chord 2, then play chord 3, then play chord 4, then play chord 5, then play chord 6. So that's the first thing you need to learn to do, just move up all of those chords using little finger inversion, okay? Now, after that, the next thing I suggest you do is I'm going to call out some numbers and see if you can find that the little finger inversion of these numbers. So the first one was chord 1. You put your little finger on chord 1, make sure there's a gap of 2, an index finger and thumb. Oh, and the other thing I'm going to explain as well is in order to learn which fingers you've got to use for this chord, I usually say to my pupils, I say little circle. And what I get people to do is stick their little finger in the air and then make a circle with the index finger and the thumb. Little circle, okay? Now, if the pupil accidentally uses the wrong finger and it accidentally starts using the middle finger instead of the index finger, so they start doing that, I always say little circle and make them do this. And then it reminds you that little finger inversion must use the index finger, not the middle finger. It's crucial that you quickly learn that the little finger inversion uses the index finger and not the middle finger. If you start using the middle finger accidentally, everything's going to go wrong and we're all going to be very sad. So make sure you use the index finger all the time. Don't start using the middle finger. It's crucial you learn at this stage. So you got little finger, index finger, and thumb. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is you try chord 1. Now I'm going to call out. We're going to try chord 4. So you've got to find chord 4. Now, the best thing to do is if you lock your fingers in place like that, so you've got them absolutely locked, and then you just move up, keeping the hand locked. Now put your little finger on 4, and if you've got your hand locked nicely, the other 2 should fall nicely into place with a gap of 2, and then you've got these 2 in a normal position. That's chord 4. Okay, so let's go back to chord 1. So you're going to move everything back, lock your hand, little finger goes on 1, and that's chord 1. Let's go back to chord 4. You're going to move your little finger, lock your hand, move your little finger up to 4, and that's a chord 4. Okay, so I'm going to call out some other chords now. Let's try 5. So you lift, move, and put your little finger on 5. Chord 2. Now remember, it's the little finger, it's got to go down to 2, and you lock, and all the others go to chord 2, okay? So hopefully you found chord 2 now. So just try chord 6. So you lock your hand, your little finger moves up to chord 6, and then play chord 6. I hope that you're playing these with me. If you're not trying to do this, you're probably not going to learn to play little finger inversion. Now, at this stage of the lesson, the crucial thing is that you get absolutely familiar with being able to play little finger inversion of any chord. So just do it yourself when the videos stop. Call out any number, 1 to 6, let's say 3, and then move your hand, put your little finger on 3, and then play a chord 3. And before we move to the next part of this lesson, get to the point where you can call out any number or get a friend to call out a number, and your hand just naturally goes. So say 4, little finger inversion, chord 4. 2, your hand falls into little finger inversion. 6, your hand falls to 6. Now, before you go any further, you need to get to the point where you can just, your hand locks in position, you just put your little finger down, and the other 2 fall into place. Always, the most important thing is you put your little finger on the key note. Don't worry about the other 2, just get the little finger. That's the first thing you should be thinking. If I say 4, little finger goes on 4, then worry about the other 2. But hopefully if your hand's locked in position, once you put your finger, say 2, once your little finger's on 2, the other 2, if it's locked in position, should naturally fall into place. And that's the little finger inversion. And so now if you practice that before you go to the next part, what you've got to do is learn to play that little finger inversion perfectly as soon as someone calls out a number. And once you can do that, you're ready to go on to part 3. But get that absolutely perfect. If you try and learn part 3 before you've got that perfect, it's all going to go wrong. So really work hard at getting that perfect. And in fact, in part 3, I'm going to teach you to play this Macklemore song using these 4 chords, using little finger inversion. So part 3, actually, we're going to do a bit of practice on little finger inversion. So that's the end of part 2. And now if you go to part 3, you can practice using the little finger inversion playing this Macklemore song.